I'm a compulsive overeater.
Hi, Doreen.
And it's really cool and an honor to be the very first person in Olympia to speak at this speakers meeting. So thank you, Greg and Kathy, for having me. And in this format, I talk about what it was like, what happened, and what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now, I think, rather than saying it. Anyhow. So for me, I grew up as an obese child, and I'm passing my picture, and that was 13 when I wasn't considered obese. That was me just overweight. And I had grown up obese when I was little, 4 or 5 year old, and then constantly put on diets and diet pills, and seeing the diet doctor, Dr. Glass, and seeing my pediatrician regularly. My whole life was around fixing me or being a obese child. And I mean, it was always in my consciousness, being how I was treated by other kids, needing to go to the doctor, how I ate, how the diet pills affected me, how my brother would be embarrassed by me, friends. I was the person who got ditched. It was like part of my best friend's membership in a club, to ditch me and make me not her friend so that she could be in this, to call me fatso, so she could be in a little club. And that was just what it was like growing up. And so, and my dear friend, we're friends today, and she made amends to me. She knows what I went through. I think that people do think once you're thin, you're like, why do I still come to meetings and all? And I have to tell you that I thought if I were thin, I would be okay. So I too defined it, if only I could be thin and pretty, life would be okay. And it was like this fantasy or dream, and I've talked about it being like if I could be Cinderella and a fairy godmother could come down and save me. So growing up, I was a compulsive overeater, but I didn't understand. And as a teenager, I would go on diets, make the list of all the foods I would eat when I got thin, and then break my diet and start eating, thinking, oh, well, I might as well get it out of my system, and then start the diet again. So I never got really thin, ever. I wished I were anorexic. I was very jealous of the girls I knew who were anorexic, and I don't think we called it anorexia back then. I got abstinent in 1979, so I was 20 years old. So for the first 20 years of my life, I was plagued by the outward manifestation of this disease, and I grew up, I believe, emotionally stunted as a little girl because I used food to cope with life. And I learned that later in my life, that was the way I could get through, that it was survival. It wasn't anybody's fault. And I do believe that I had the propensity, so I do believe in what environment, being born with it, and your environment that makes you ripe for it. And you discover it. I was a baby girl when I discovered food, because of, that's how I don't understand it, but that's how I got obese as a little girl. So I was a kid who would take, one of the little kids that stole candy in the grocery store, and would sneak at other people's houses. I would be obsessed, I remember. And I did, I guess I did live in denial that why aren't I just like other kids? And I would think I was doing what other kids do. But I obviously wasn't just doing what other kids did with food, because they were normal. I mean, they looked normal. And as a teenager, I would be sneaking food. I would be eating, I guess, binging with friends. I don't know, but I remember I had a couple eating buddies, and then we were diet buddies. And they were, really good friends. One was loyal and then became disloyal in high school. That somebody else, she became a cheerleader, and then that was the end of me. And I had nice people who still loved me in my life. So it wasn't like I didn't have love, and I was an honor student. So it wasn't like I had a pitiful life, but I was suicidal. And I hated myself. I hated life. And I started when I was, got back into, not back into, but using speed, or having diet pills and then using speed in middle school and high school. And even not knowing the consequences, like passing speed in history class or whatever class it was in high school, and never considering that that was illegal or that there would be consequences for anything like that. It was what we did. It was like anything to get to be thin. And anyhow, so being suicidal, the way I got to program was I was finally, my parents got me to the doctor, and the pediatrician said she needs help and wanted me to go to a psychiatrist. And at that point it was, well, if sick people go to a psychiatrist, but if you need to go, then you go. And then it was working with the psychiatrist in high school. And shortly after that, he said, if you stay in your house, you will die, and you got to get out, away from your family, out of the house. And I went to college for a few years, and then I dropped out because I could not stay abstinent. I had come to OA in 1978 when I was 18, 18. I came January 1st, 1978, and I was in for 14 months trying to be like everybody else and do what they did, but like copy them instead of having that whatever, you don't know what it is until you get like the bottom. And I mean, you know at the bottom, but it wasn't bottom enough to come here. I had to go through time and finally feel like everybody had lied to me in the program, because everybody was adults, and I was trying to be like the adults. And I binged a few different times, and then my last binge started with a piece of cake at lunch where I worked at the bank, and then I kept going, throwing pastry stuff out the window of the car, drinking a diet soda, going back to the old boyfriend, going out to eat and drink, and then needing to go to 7-Eleven or whatever and keeping going. And I woke up the next morning with all the normal stuff: sweaty, swollen, cotton mouth, the degraded, incomprehensible demoralization, hating everybody, hating the world again, and wanting to die. And I called someone, like threw myself on the floor and called a person in the program. And she came, or no, she said, go eat breakfast. No, I don't quite eat breakfast, but go to work and meet her for lunch. And that's where I was trying to start. And then she could only handle so much of me. And then other people came and helped me and stayed with me overnight. So I had the program in action where I was willing to say, I'm desperate, help me. But I still hated OA. And everyone said, go ahead and eat. If you want to eat, keep going. We're here for you. Like, they weren't going to leave me. And if I wanted to go binge, fine. But I didn't want it. I was obsessed, and I had the compulsion. And the compulsion, can come on that fast. The obsession can always be there, but then when you start, you can't stop. And I got through the next 24 hours with people sleeping on my couch and staying at the house with me at my apartment, and then being with me all morning, and then taking me to a meeting, and I stood up and told everyone I hated them, and I hated away. And I didn't know if I was going to stay or not stay, but I was here, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And afterwards, people took me to someone's house, and they sat around and 12-stepped me, and that talking to me, and then having me call the woman's sponsor whose house we were at. And then they had me talk to her, and she said, meet me at a meeting. And later I was taken to that meeting, because I didn't have a car. I was taking the bus, and going to work after I had quit school. And I met the woman, and then we went and talked, and she laid out the program, which was, this is your food plan. It's 3 meals a day, nothing in between. You call me at this precise time every morning. You make 3 phone calls. Does this sound familiar? You make 3 phone calls a day, and you have to do reading every day. You have to go to a meeting every day. And I have to call at that exact time. I have to follow my food plan and go to any length to do that. And I can't think of what I'm weighing and measuring my food, blah, 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 blah. And that was the way I started my abstinence. And I lost my weight pretty quickly over 4 months. I have to say that I wasn't happy. I was following directions. And it wasn't that I was depressed. Like, my depression didn't go away. I was still suicidal, had those feelings. But I was told that I didn't have a choice. I'd have to come back and repeat everything in life all over again if I took my life. And I couldn't bear the thought of having to go through my life again. And then to say I didn't have a choice was really critical. That, like, to take that option off the table. So I had to live with it and find a way to, like, accept that my life may be that small. And it was going to meetings, abstaining, and getting through breakfast to lunch to dinner to the next day. And I worked at a little job. I'd have to call my sponsor on time. I'd have to take the bus early, stand outside, and wait to the exact moment, go into the payphone, put my dime in or quarter, whatever it was, and stand at the payphone to make my phone call. And that's like the going to any length thing. And that was really, like, that was what I had to do. And people would go to meals with me, people would go to meetings with me. I did none of this by myself. I was like nursed. And we would go in little groups, we moved in a little herd, whatever, going to meetings together. And going out to eat or getting help with how to do the food or whatever. And even more than other people, you had to have 7 vegetables in your salad. That was the other part of it. You couldn't, or 6, you couldn't have, and you couldn't eat the same thing every meal. I mean, they were like very specific, and it was all about surrender. And it had to be pretty on a placemat, on a pretty plate. So anyhow, I had to say that because what was part of this was I was being guided into having self-worth and self-esteem. And the deal was to treat myself like somebody else would treat me. And that is still a key part of recovery, that not that I have to come first over you, but that I have to be abstinent because that's what I would want for you. And that it matters what I do to other people. What I do and how I live my life makes a difference in how other people live their lives. And to know that how other people have gone with me or ahead of me, how that makes a difference to me. And that's part of the, having a sponsor and sponsoring or paying it forward is basically what it is, helping the next person. And so I learned over time that as my life was small and I accepted it, it started to grow a little bigger, and I was very frightened, kind of agoraphobic, where it started with walking around the block and evolved until being able to go back to college, go to graduate school, get married, have children, move around the country, have a relationship with my family, and then eventually getting epilepsy. So it was like, I thought if I had done everything, I'd keep having this great life. And what happened was I had to still be willing to live my life and accept whatever came my way, all the good stuff and the bad stuff. And so the last 18 years have been living with my health condition, which totally like changed everything I had accomplished, quote, quote, and had me have to start life in a new way and be willing to stay abstinent through things being horrible and hard because I have seizures. And I'm completely dependent on medication, and I'm dependent on other people, and I hate all of that. But that's what I've had to learn how to live with and be willing to be abstinent. So the bottom line of my life is to be a person of service. I'm a baby spiritual person, so it's been a very long process spiritually. I didn't come into program believing in God. I didn't know, and then I learned to have a higher power, and I have a higher power who takes care of me and does for me what I can't do for myself, and and will give me the strength to get through whatever I have to go through. And that doesn't mean I alone can get through what I have to go through. I get people who are like the angels in my life to help me get through what I have to go through. The right person or the right thing happens. And I look for those miracles, which I was taught in the program, because that keeps me feeling safe. And I do know that abstinence keeps me safe. And it's not just safe from myself, it's safe in the world. It's safe. I think our disease is like a monster on our shoulder, like waiting, always waiting, and wanting us to kill ourselves, like a disease of self-hatred. And when I'm abstinent, I don't have to be in self-destruction, but I am still a compulsive overeater, and I would go to that if something started. And I wouldn't care about anybody or anything. I would be binging, and not just little binging, like in the corner, stuffing my face, never enough food for me. And immediately what would be coming with that is no peace, insanity, and wanting to commit suicide. And I would probably be back like exactly where I was, and only now I have more resources that I could kill myself. But I am not there today. I don't want to be there, and thank God I have a program. And I wish I had more time to talk about how I work my program on a daily basis. But what I'm so grateful about is that I have a program to live. And then in my last 2 minutes, I will say, what does program mean? And program for me is a formula. It's a formula I can live each day, that and each year are all part of my life, where I now have a way to wake up and thank God for abstinence and sobriety. I do certain things every morning with self-grooming and self-care, always my breakfast first, like breakfast, get up, breakfast, yay. And then I do live my life with breakfast and in between, then lunch and in between, and dinner and in between. So I do have a fairly structured routine life. And then working the steps, it does require me to deal with my anger or my behavior. And I'm still someone who pushes feelings down and does it that way instead of yelling at people, whatever. I can self-destruct, and so it's anger turned inward. So working the other steps like inventory and making amends are usually about this dishonesty and lying to myself and everyone about what's really going on for me. And then I can, you can still hurt people if you're passive, and I can be aggressive too, or say the wrong thing, or do the wrong thing, or hurt people. But I have a way to see that that's happening with this program. And I have a way to clean it, to ask God for help. And I think defects are instincts out of proportion. So when I look and say, do I have defects? I learned that it's okay to see them because it was so scary. And I don't have to be afraid of them because I have helped to get through and see them and then get better as part of my program. I don't mean a better person, I mean healing. And the hardest part of the program is meditation for me. The 11th step is really hard. Prayer, I was taught to say, please God, help me. I don't have to say any fancy prayers. Prayer is easy compared to sitting still and meditating. So in my life, I have a sponsor today who's that's a huge part of her program. So sponsors have had to change for me over time, but I have stayed close to my first sponsors. In fact, the first woman I ever met in OA, who was my sponsor a few different times, is one of my dearest friends today. And she has like 45 or 6 years of abstinence. And she's still my dear friend today. So I think my time is up, but thank you so much for inviting me and letting me be the first speaker of this group.
Keep going.
Okay.
And we'll just pass the phone around to people who want to ask a question. They are being recorded. Does anybody have a question?
Repeat the question for the phone and just leave it.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah, so I will take questions and I'll repeat your question when you ask it, because I don't think people will be able to hear. You can ask about anything you want related to compulsive overeating.
How long have you been abstinent?
The question was how long I've been abstinent, and I've been abstinent for 39 years. I got abstinent April 22nd, 1979.
Can you talk about your relationship with your higher power?
So the question is my relationship with my higher power. Well, the first thing is I was told to write an ad as if it were in the newspaper of what I want a higher power to be, because I came in, I hated the word God. Like when it was talked about, I thought this is some religious place, and I was really scared. And then I was reinforced with higher power. It didn't have to be God, because God meant more Christianity, and I'm Jewish. So I had to find a way to believe in a higher power and separate myself from religion. And then this one ad was basically what I had talked about, being taken care of, wanting to feel safe and be protected, to be guided, to have what I need whenever I needed it. And then over time, that's what I really have had. And I do ask for help every day. There's the first 3 steps. And so step 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3. I was taught, run up the steps, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And when you start feeling like everything's out of control, go back to step 1, 2, and 3. And this is like every day you can do this, but like, have I turned my will and my life over to the care of God? When I feel like everything is crazy or whatever, it goes back to, do I admit I'm powerless over food and everybody, people, places, and things, thoughts, feelings, actions, that my life's unmanageable, came to believe a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. And then am I making a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand God? And that's how I have to deal with getting abstinently every day. And some days, of course, are much harder than others, and most days are, I always know I'm a compulsive overeater, but I know that if I can somehow turn my will and life over to my higher power that I choose to call God, I can get through the day and I'll get what I need. Yeah, I don't know if that helps.
mentioned you have challenges with meditation. Have you found any secrets to being more successful or a routine that works for meditation?
What I just got asked was about meditation, and given that I talked about having trouble, have I found secrets, or how do I deal with meditation? And I know, well, I learned that I don't have to have a fancy way. I thought for years somehow I was missing a secret, like somehow there was some secret about what people did and how did they sit quietly, the idea of a silent retreat is hell to me. I couldn't be silent for 3 hours unless I was asleep. So I had to, over time, keep looking. So there was the seeking, so sought through prayer and meditation. I took different little classes, but I think the understanding of meditation in society has evolved as time has gone on. And now there's, of course, mindfulness that everybody's hearing about. And my sponsor, I've always, when I was 7 years abstinent, I found a sponsor who had complete faith in God. And I needed that at that time. I needed a sponsor who could teach me about God, and had the belief that I wanted. And now, over years, at this point in time, I have a sponsor who is committed to meditating every day, and her life revolves around mindfulness. And I have found she has what I want. Maybe a little too much of what. But so today, what I do, in the night, it's been kind of a difficult couple days for me in my head. And so I put on my little headphones in the night and listened to a meditation teacher and did a little meditation. But that's I would never have done that. So I'm a seeker, and I listen to meditation tapes. I need a guided meditation. I'm not good at being by myself. I was taught, I guess the one big one that's the simplest one is breathing and thinking about quiet, and then silence. I can't think of it, but basically it's about seeing the world bigger and opening up rather than closing up. And it's part of a meditation that I finally got, that I can do by myself. So thank you.
You had mentioned that when you first came in, they encouraged you to come and eat if you have to, and so what happened at that time? Did you go abstinent right away? Because it sounded like they all gathered around you and held you up. So did you end up staying abstinent, or did you end up eating and just continually coming back?
Okay, that's a great question. So the question was, the first part was coming to OA, and did I get abstinent right away? But the second part was after, in my story, that I binged again, and then I talked about how the people helped me, and they said I could keep eating, and they would love me. The first time I got abstinent was not doing everything I told you guys. I had smoked dope and binged again, and then I kind of had a complete breakdown starting to binge, going across the college campus and not being able to stop, and then needing to be picked up, and it was a disaster, and that was like a horrible time. But that was not my bottom. My bottom was what I talked about 14 months later. And what I did was I interviewed people, and I said, if I ate more, I had interviewed people who have been in relapse, and I asked if I could get it out of my system. If I kept eating, would I be able to eat enough to get it out of my system and then want to be abstinent? And I was told that the more times I did that, the farther, that it just would take me farther and farther and farther away from being able to get abstinent. Like the disease would be able to trick me and say, oh, you can do this because you can get abstinent again. And I was taught about the revolving door, which is that, yeah, you can go out and try to be eating, but you may not get back. And so I just, every day I didn't want to be eating. And so I started learning, or not learning, but I started understanding the obsession and compulsion separation. And that the compulsion, I believe sugar was a huge part of that. And so it was really critical to get off sugar. And we were told 21 days you get away from it and it stops having its arm, your hands around your neck. And then it would slowly quiet down the obsession. And that I had to be willing to live with the obsession, that it wasn't going to go away if I ate. It was the disease trying to trick me. And the woman today who did that 12-stepping at her house around that table, she has been in and out of OA. She wasn't able to stay abstinent because the disease kept getting her. And but she's still a dear friend in my life. And it was a gift that I got it from her and was taught. And I think you'll hear that from other people who relapse, is that it takes you farther and farther away from believing you could be abstinent. So.
So if there was a newcomer in the room, what would your words be?
The question was, if there was a newcomer in the room, what would my words be? Well, I think it's always important, like I said at every meeting, that this isn't a diet club. And that I do believe if you want to lose weight here, you will. Because if you're abstinent, which means for me, putting the plug in the jug with food, which for me means eating 3 meals a day and not in between. Today, there's a lot more about science with snacks and all that. So there's no formula. It's just that for me, 3 meals a day, but having structure with my food where I'm forced to eat and be done with it, and then go on for a period of time and eat and be done with it and go on within a day. That's what abstinence is, for what I believe abstinence is for any of us. And I'm a compulsive overeater. They're now anorexics, bulimics. I mean, there's different ways this disease manifests itself, but I can only speak to being a garden variety compulsive overeater, like most people were when OA started, and who did the circuit of diets back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And 90s and 2000s. But there's so much more that people have available today to deal with weight and all. I would say that this program isn't for everyone. I would say that knowing or believing it's the last house on the block is something critical for me to know, that I would just be back in the whole circle again. And I would think, I do think that there are other solutions for people, that OA isn't for everybody. So when I say the last house on the block, it's for me the last house on the block. Because I do really believe that other people, that there are other ways people need to do it. I would say that one of the biggest gifts is living one day at a time, and that I don't have to be responsible for all the world's problems. And I know the world is a really difficult place, and it can be upsetting, and it is upsetting and scary a lot of times. But if I focus on what I can do today in this world, right here, right now, and be able to be of service to other people, then I'm not going to have to compulsively overeat. And I'm not going to have to want to kill myself or hurt myself. And that if I stay like that, I'll be able to do whatever I can to make things better. But I can't live with the big world problems. I have to only know that I just have to live 24 hours. And that, I think that's it. Probably that's it. I would go on and on, but the 24-hour concept is really critical.
Can you talk about how you work the steps on a problem that would arise in your life? Something that's, family problem, or not getting specific about the problem, but how does that look when you are under the weight of a problem and you know that the only way out is to work the steps? Could you just kind of talk to us about that?
The question was, how do I work, quote, the program or my program to deal with problems? And if there's a problem I'm dealing with, whatever it is, what is it I do? And so the tools are critical. So one of the things I first have as a checklist are the tools, and there used to just be 6 or 7, and now I think there's 9 or. But the tools are really critical. So if my head's a blank and I can't think about the steps right at that second, except 1, 2, 3, making sure, okay, do I believe God's going to help me through this? And then I do look at the tools to make sure that those are like things I can do. So going to a meeting, a phone call, the literature. Am I being of help today to someone? Have I talked on the telephone? Or these days there's text and email and lots of stuff. And meetings you can do online or whatever. But I know that those are there. So if I can't figure out what to do, I'm not willing to work the 12 steps at that moment. I have my tools to give me time. So I don't have to, I don't say, well, I have to eat if I can't work the steps, because I had no idea what the steps were at first. They were just like, what? But what I do today, I have to speak to, what would be the problem. If I'm, let's see, because I think about related, well, let's say it was about, well, getting sick is too big of a thing. I'm sorry, I'm trying to throw out a problem.
Health thing, maybe a health thing?
Oh, okay. So a health thing. So I have to be, first thing is, am I willing to go through this? Having to be willing to go through it. And to keep praying to be willing. That's one thing. And that's kind of sounds ostentatious, or it sounds too esoteric. Well, let's say this. My son is in the military. That would be a good one, because that is one of the hardest things in my life. And in the program, I learned about choices in my life. And with my son, when he said he wanted to go in or was interested in it, one day I saw an ad in the newspaper, and it talked about this presentation of the different military arms, talking for high school kids about the military, the different, so Army, Navy, Air Force, and they had people talking about it in an evening. And I did not know if I wanted to tell him. And here I had this ad, and I'm the only one who knew. And should I or shouldn't I tell my husband and son? And I was taught I have to be honest. And I can't stay abstinent if I'm not honest, rigorously honest. So that was one of the hardest things I did, is I told them that there was this session. And so they went. And my son really liked it. And then I had some people my son could talk to, and that might help him figure out about how do you apply to go to the military academy, and do I tell him or not? And this was later time, and again I had to be honest. And then this comes with the higher power and believing in something. Do I tell him or connect him? So I connected him. And then he went through the interviews, and I had to keep praying, okay, if it's meant to be, please help me accept. So then he did apply, and he got the recommendations to go, and he had a choice to get in. And I did say that one branch I did not want him to go to, and he respected me with that because I was being a good sport, and to say the least. And then when he decided to go, he said, "You're either with me or you're not." And in the program, I know that I have to, like, what can I live with and what do I want? And I want a relationship with my son. So I said, I'd rather be with you than tell you not to do it. But over this time period, I had to write a ton of inventory about how angry I was about the military, and how I was mad at my husband because he encouraged my son. And I was mad, like, why did I have to tell him? And I'm afraid. And then when my son did get in, and I had to go into a meeting, and I just sobbed and had to talk about it. And then over time, I had to find people whose children were in the military, and those were program people, you know. And they came out of the woodwork, so I wasn't the only one going through it. And then I had to keep doing that over and over again with each part of his life in the military. And now is like one of the worst times. And again, I have to, this is so hard, I don't believe it a lot of the time, but that he's going to be okay. And it's what he wants, and it's his life and not mine. And we each have our own higher power. But I have to act as if I don't believe it, and I've got to write out my fears and write out affirmations and pray and talk and come to meetings and then do more and more service. That's the other thing, is I've got to find ways to keep myself where I can't be there for him, but I can help somebody else. And then hopefully by doing that, I know my son is going to get what he needs. So a lot has to do with my actions. And then that helps me strengthen my faith in the world and his safety. So.
You said you wanted to expand more on how you work your program every day. Is there
Okay.
more?
Okay, we have this. So the question is expanding on if there's more about how I work my program every day. And so I guess the answer is yes. So I have a little routine that I don't know if it's exactly programmed, but it ties in with what does someone with self-worth do? Like, how would I take care of you? And that's how I try to take care of myself. So, like, my meals are the most important thing. I mean, seriously, knowing I'm going to get and how I'm going to get and where I'm going to get my breakfast, lunch, and dinner are critical, because then my food can be taken care of. And if my food is taken care of, I can get through anything, is what I really believe. But I get up and I always make sure about, like, self-grooming or whatever is really important, and more important since I've been sick than before I got sick. Because before I got sick, I was in the world with everybody else doing career and all that stuff. But I have every day, I don't know how I'm going to feel. So I have to, make sure the food, like, I know my food's going to be in order. And then I need to make sure I've, like, taken care of myself with a shower and getting dressed and being in nice clothes that I feel good in, blah, blah, blah. And then I don't know what's going to happen physically, how I'm going to feel next. So then I have to, and I know that lots of times I can feel sick at any time or later. So I do break the day up into parts where, like, now we're going to do the morning and see what can I do, what do I need to do. And if I feel awful, I may lie in bed or on the couch. And I was taught even before I have my health condition that was okay. And then after that, I see what I only have to accomplish one thing a day. That's the other thing, is, like, can I do one productive thing even if I don't feel well, one productive thing, whether it's emptying the dishwasher or sticking laundry in, making the bed. That is like, even if I feel my worst, a productive thing. And I'm thank God, a lot more productive a lot of the days. And then I make sure I pretty much talk to at least one person. Oh, and then even though I don't go to meetings every day, I go to 2 to 3 meetings a week, but I was taught that it doesn't matter how many years I'm abstinent, I have to go to meetings. And I go to meetings for 2 reasons. One is I claim my seat and I remember who I am. I'm a compulsive overeater. And the other is, of course, to help other people. And I have to, but it's really important people in recovery know I'm just a person among people. I'm the same as everybody else. The length of time doesn't matter. And I have to know that every day, that how long I'm abstinent doesn't matter, in that I'm still a bite away. But how long I'm abstinent does matter in all the experience I have staying abstinent. Like, that's the difference with someone with long-term abstinence versus shorter term, is that I've gone through that many more days and that many more experiences to call upon how I stayed abstinent. But I have to do that every day and remember who I am, which is I'm a compulsive overeater. So thank you. I think we may be out of time, but thank you so much for this privilege, and it's been an honor.